The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It was a sleepy place with soft daydreams and castles in the clouds in a summer sky. On the east side of the Hudson River was a town. It was called Tarrytown. It was called that by the Dutch wives. On shopping days, their husbands would drink and they would wait. That is what people say. I'm not sure that is the truth, but the town is named Tarrytown. Near Tarrytown is a little valley. It's not very big. Not many people live there, so it is very quiet. There is a small school in the valley. There are tall hills around it with a road that goes into it. There is also a small stream, but the loudest sounds are the birds singing. The people who live near the valley say that things in the valley are different. The people there came from Holland long ago. They named the valley Sleepy Hollow. Everything here is quieter than anywhere else. Even the people here are different. It's a strange place. Some people say that an old German doctor put a magic spell on the valley. Others say that an Indian witch doctor or a wizard put a spell on it. No one knows the truth, but people here see and hear strange things. There are many shooting stars here, and many people have heard music or strange voices singing. And of course there are ghost stories, but the strongest ghost or spirit is a man on a horse. He is all in black, with no head. Some say that he is the ghost of a soldier who lost his head in a war. He rides at night, and he always stops near the church. People say that he was buried there. And at night he comes out to look for his head. He is called the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. And this is where our story begins. Ichabod Crane was a school teacher. He was the school teacher in Sleepy Hollow. He was tall and skinny. His nose was long, and his eyes were green, and his clothes were always too big for him. When he walked in the wind, he looked like a scarecrow. The schoolroom was only one room. It was near the bottom of a hill. There were many trees on the hill, but there was only one tree next to the school. There was a stream next to the tree. If you walked near the school, you could hear the children. Ichabod was a good teacher. If the saying, "Spare the rod and spoil the child," is true, then none of the children were spoiled, but he only spanked them when they were bad. It was to help them to learn. Ichabod Crane really loved his children. Some days he would play with the older boys. On holidays, he would walk home with the younger children. He liked to visit children with pretty sisters or a good mother. You see, he didn't get paid a lot of money. And he liked to eat, so if he was nice to the families, they would give him dinner. Sometimes he would help them with the farming or cut wood. He also liked to sing. Some people paid him to teach their children songs for church. He sang in a loud and clear voice. On Sundays, you could hear him singing from across the pond. Anyway, the school teacher is an important man. The women like him because he is kind and gentle and has good manners. So, when he visited a family, they were nice to him. There were special dishes and cakes for him. Ichabod Crane liked the people of Sleepy Hollow, but he liked the young girls best. He liked to talk with them by the pond. They liked him because he knew poetry and spoke like a gentleman. Sometimes he would sit with 3 or 4 of them and tell them funny stories. Some of the young men didn't like this. They wished they could talk like Ichabod Crane. Ichabod could also read. Very few people in the area could read. He read many different kinds of books, but the books he liked best were ones about ghosts and witches. Sometimes he would end school early. Then he would walk down near the stream and read until sunset. Then he would go out of Sleepy Hollow to someone's house for dinner. As he walked, there were many strange sounds. It was a magical time. Birds would cry. A firefly would flash on and off. Oh, what was that? Something hit him in the face. Oh, it was just a big beetle. This time of day always scared Ichabod a little. And when he got scared, he would sing songs from church. Then people would hear his voice floating out of Sleepy Hollow. Was that a ghost? Or was it just some snow on a bush? Was someone behind him? Or was it just an echo? Was it the headless horseman? Or was it just the wind? But all these things only came out at night. There was something that scared all men more than ghosts. Women. Ichabod was afraid of women, but he still liked them. He liked them because they were pretty and soft, but he was afraid of them because he didn't understand them. The one that Ichabod liked better than any other was Katrina Van Tassel. She was very pretty, and she wore very pretty clothes. She wasn't old-fashioned, but she wasn't too modern. And she wore short dresses. Why? You could see her foot and her ankle. And her father was the richest farmer around the Tarrytown. Ichabod liked her very much, and when he saw her father's farm, he liked her better. There were many big elm trees. Balthus Van Tassel had the biggest house and barn he had ever seen, and on his farm were dogs, chickens, pigs, cows, and turkeys. And when Ichabod saw animals, he saw food. He was very skinny, but he loved to eat. He saw the animals as roast turkeys, fried chickens, and baked hams. When he looked at the fields, he saw wheat, corn, and rye. Then there were hundreds of apple trees. But that was not everything. In the house were bags of corn and wool. Red peppers and yellow peaches were on the shelves, and many, many silver dishes and pots. That was how Ichabod's troubles began. He had to make Katrina marry him. It would not be easy. In the old days, a knight only had to fight other knights, or maybe a dragon. Times were different now. Now there were many young men who also wanted to marry Katrina, and they watched each other very carefully. They would fight any new person who wanted to marry Katrina. The biggest one was named Bram Van Brunt. He had broad shoulders and strong arms. He had a strong face and lots of dark curly hair. He was the best fighter and horse rider, and though he had many fights, he never really hurt anyone because he was not a bad man. He liked to get into fights, but that was only to try and stop them. He had 4 friends who always rode together. When they rode at night, they would scream and make a lot of noise. People would say, "There goes Brombones and his boys." They knew that if there was any trouble, Brombones was near. He was always getting into trouble, but he had a good heart. He also loved Katrina. Because he was so big, when his horse was at the Van Tassel house, no other man stopped there. And he was there every Sunday night. A small man would have been afraid of Brombones. Ichabod was not afraid. He would visit her house to teach her how to sing songs for church. Mrs. Van Tassel would cook. Mr. Van Tassel would sit and smoke his pipe. Ichabod would take Katrina down near the pond and teach her how to sing. Some women have only one door to their heart. A man must look carefully for that door. Other women have many doors. No man can find all of those doors. Sometimes a pretty girl likes to have many boys at many different doors. Katrina had many doors. Ichabod went to the Van Tassel house to teach Katrina to sing. Brown Bones didn't like that. He got a little angry. Brown Bones knew that he was stronger. He did not want to fight with Ichabod Crane. He didn't want to hurt Ichabod, but he was jealous. Ichabod went to visit Katrina every week as ever. Then Balthus Van Tassel invited everyone to a party. It would be a big party. It was a very special day. Ichabod would tell Katrina that he loved her. Then he would ask her to marry him, and she would say yes, of course. That day he ended school early. He wanted to get ready for the party. He combed his hair. He took out his old black suit. He washed his face. He looked at himself in the mirror and washed his face again. Then he combed his hair again. He wanted everything to be right. He put on his black suit, looked at himself in the mirror, and combed his hair one more time. Then he went out to his horse. It wasn't his own horse. He had borrowed it from Hans Van Riefer. The horse was an old work horse, but now he was too old to work. He was mean and skinny. He had only one eye, and his name was Gunpowder. Ichabod's skinny arms and legs waved in the wind. He looked like a grasshopper on Gunpowder's back. It was a clear fall day. The trees were brown, red, purple, and yellow. Ducks were flying in the sky. The birds and squirrels were playing in the trees. Ichabod left Sleepy Hollow and turned to the Van Tassel house. He could not see the house yet, but there were other farms along the way. He saw baskets of apples under the trees. In the fields were corn and pumpkins. Then Ichabod thought of Katrina. He thought of her cooking. She would be his wife. He knew that she liked him and would want to marry him. He rode along the Hudson River. The sun was setting. There were boats on the river. The sky was turning red. There were a few small clouds in the sky. Katrina would be a good wife. Everything was right. When he reached the Van Tassel house, there were many people. The farmers wore big coats and big shoes. The girls all had pretty dresses. The wives wore big dresses. The boys wore coats with many big brass buttons. They had all combed their hair. Then there was Brown Bones. He came on his horse, their devil. Their devil was mean and strong. Brom liked strong things. A weak horse was for a weak person. Well, it was time to eat. And that was what Ichabod liked to do. Before he talked with any of the girls, he wanted to eat. There was more food here than he had ever seen. Cakes, breads, and donuts were all on one table. On another table were apple, peach, and pumpkin pies. Then next to the pies were roasted fish, broiled chickens, smoked hams, and baked turkeys, and plenty to drink. And Ichabod would eat a little of everything. Drinking makes some men happy. Eating made Ichabod happy. He looked around him. Someday this would be his home. This food would all be his. The farm would be his, and Katrina would be his wife. An old black man began to play a fiddle. The people began to dance. Ichabod liked to dance. He asked Katrina to dance with him. She did. Everyone was laughing and dancing, except Brown Bones. He watched Ichabod and Katrina dance. He watched them for a long time. When the dancing was over, the people sat around Balthus. He told the stories about the war. All the men had their own story. They were all brave men. But if all their stories had been true, America's war would have been over in one afternoon. Then there were stories about ghosts. Someone told the story of how Major Andre was found hanging from a big tall tree in the middle of the road. Another told the story of a woman who died in the snow. You can still hear crying some nights. Then someone told the story of the headless horseman. Another had seen him waiting by the church at night. Many ghosts were seen by the church. That is because many people were buried there. There were many trees around the church. The church was white and stood on a small hill. Near its front was a small stream and a bridge. The church was near the entrance to Sleepy Hollow. But it wasn't in Sleepy Hollow. Old Brower didn't believe in ghosts until he saw the headless horseman. The horseman had chased him along the road to the church. He caught Old Brower and threw him into the river. Now he believed in ghosts. Brown Bones also met the horseman. He had raced the horseman and was going to win. But when they got near the church, the horseman turned into a flash of fire and smoke. But now it was late. Everyone was tired. It was time to go home. The parents gathered up their children. Some of the girls got on their boyfriend's horse. You could hear voices and laughter as they left. Ichabod waited. He wanted to be the last. Then he could tell her he loved her. Then she could say that she loved him too. Now, I don't know what they said to each other. But after they talked, Ichabod left quietly. He was very sad. He kicked his horse and rode home. At first, Ichabod was sad and angry. How could Katrina not like him? Wasn't he smart and handsome? Then he looked around. The road was very dark. He heard a dog bark. Then he heard some crickets, now a frog, and then Ichabod remembered the stories. He remembered the ghosts. He remembered the horsemen. The trees around him were tall and dark. They had strange shapes. He came to a big tree in the middle of the road. It was bigger than the other trees. This was where they found Major Andre. Ichabod began to whistle. Someone else whistled? No, it was just the wind. Was someone there? No, it was a bird in the tree. He passed the tree. Nothing happened. It was dark, and he wasn't even in Sleepy Hollow yet. He came to a small bridge. There were tall trees next to the bridge. They hung over the bridge. He stopped. He wanted to get across the bridge fast, so he kicked Gunpowder. Gunpowder jumped off the road, then went back into the road. He stopped right in front of the bridge. Then Ichabod heard a noise from the stream. His hands got a little wet. He looked down and saw a large black shape. It didn't move. What could he do? If it was a ghost, it would be very fast. "Who are you?" called Ichabod. No answer. He asked again. Still no answer. Ichabod began to sing church songs. Then the thing jumped onto the road. Ichabod could see it better now. His heart thumped. It was a rider on a black horse. They were bigger than Ichabod and Gunpowder. Gunpowder began to walk slowly. He crossed the bridge. The rider crossed the bridge too. Then the rider went on the side of the road. Ichabod went faster. The rider went faster. Ichabod went slower. The rider went slower. Then they went over a hill. Ichabod began to shake. The rider didn't have a head, but he was holding something. It was his head. Ichabod remembered the Brown Bones story. He kicked Gunpowder really hard, and he shot forward. He ran as fast as he could. But the horsemen ran fast too. The wind blew by them. Soon they reached the road to Sleepy Hollow. But Gunpowder turned the other way. He turned toward the church. Gunpowder was scared too. He ran faster and faster. Then Ichabod saw the church. His saddle broke and fell off. Ichabod slipped. But he held on to Gunpowder's neck. He heard the horseman ride over the saddle. Ichabod and Gunpowder were almost flying. Gunpowder's hair hit Ichabod in the face. Ichabod's heart was beating as fast as Gunpowder's feet. "I have to get to the bridge," thought Ichabod. "Then I will be safe." The ghost rider was very close now. Ichabod could hear the black horse breathing hard. He kicked Gunpowder one last time. His horse leaped onto the bridge and ran across. Ichabod turned to look back at the horseman. The horseman had stopped just before the bridge. Then he rose on his horse and threw something round. It was his head. Ichabod was so afraid he couldn't move. Crunch! It hit him. He fell to the ground. Gunpowder and the black horse and rider rode past him. The next morning, Gunpowder was found at home. He didn't have a saddle, but Ichabod didn't come. The children came for school, but the teacher wasn't there. Hans Van Rieper went to look for Ichabod and his saddle. He found his saddle. Then he followed the road. There were 2 sets of horse footprints in the road. Both horses had been running very fast. Then he got to the church. Near the bridge was Ichabod's hat, and nearby was a smashed pumpkin. The people looked in the stream and ooze, but they never found Ichabod anywhere. Everyone believed that the headless horseman had taken their schoolteacher, but no one knew why the pumpkin was there. They asked everyone. There was another strange thing. Brown Buns soon married Katrina. When they told him the story of what they had found, Bram listened quietly. But when they told him about the pumpkin, Bram laughed loudly and shook his head. Some people thought that Brown Buns knew something, but didn't say anything about it. But the old women there knew the truth. They knew that the headless horseman had taken Ichabod, and now there are many stories about the church and the bridge. Many boys say that they have heard a strange voice singing in the night when they walk by the church or through Sleepy Hollow.